Part 2, types of nonverbal communication. Body movement is one part of nonverbal communication. And kinesthetics, describes the study of how people communicate through body movements. So our eyes and face, we use them a lot for nonverbal communication because they're the most noticeable parts of the body. Nonverbal messages that we send through them aren't the easiest to read though, even though we think they are. Researchers found that there's at least 8 distinguishable positions of the eyebrows and forehead, 8 more of the eyes and lids, and 10 more for the lower face. So you can make all kinds of different faces. The significance of face in interpersonal communication can be seen in many faces we allude to, like saving face, FaceTime, a poker face, facing our fears. Gazes and glances are usually signals of lookers' interest. However, the type of interest can vary. And also there's the look. Most of our moms have a look. A lot of your middle school, high school teachers had the look, where they would just kind of give you the eyes. I always knew from across the room at a party or whatever, I could feel my mom's eyes burning in the back of my head when I was misbehaving, because she was just standing there just looking at me, giving me the look, knowing that I'm going to get a butt spanking before I got to the car when we get out there, right? Part of this body movement is also posture. Paying attention to posture of those around us, as well as your own, you'll probably find a channel of nonverbal communication that reveals how people feel about themselves and others. Teachers and speakers tend to look at posture. In a classroom, if you notice that the kids are all slumping over or putting their heads down or something like that, it's just like, okay, you've got to take a break or do something, right? Poker players, as they're playing poker, their posture will get better if they have a better hand. If their hand's not so good, their shoulders kind of go in. We miss this a lot because it's really subtle. Gestures are another part of it. Gestures are a fundamental element of communication, so fundamental that in fact that people who have been blind from birth still gesture. Gestures are sometimes intentional, like a wave, kind of thing like that, but a lot of times our gestures are unconscious. Some people gesture more than others. I don't gesture a whole lot, culturally. If my parents would see one of these videos, they would be like, what are you doing waving your hands around so much, right? I tend to try and gesture to give you guys something else to look at besides my face, or to point, kind of thing like that. There are some people though, if you tell them to sit on their hands, they can't even talk because they just need to gesture so much. Touch is another part of nonverbal communication. It's called haptics. Touch sessions increase the mother's bonds with babies, reduces their anxiety, showing that touch is important to both givers and receivers. Touch plays a large part in how we respond to others. There's been all kinds of studies in hospitals and in nursing homes now because the patients there's less touch. Families aren't allowed in. And because of that, patients aren't healing as well or as quickly, because the touch helps in our healing process. Our voice is also part of nonverbal communication. It's called paralanguage. It describes the way a message is spoken. Your vocal rate, pronunciation, pitch, tone, volume, emphasis can give us the same word or words many meanings. Usually right now I would show a little video, a Bud Light commercial, where the guy says dude, right? And all he says is dude, kind of thing like that, right? Pull it up, it's kind of funny because he's just saying the one word, but because of paralanguage, because of his voice, each of those little segments is an entire different meaning. Non-vocal factors, when vocal factors contradict a verbal message, when the speaker screams at you, I'm not angry, remember, we will tend to believe the nonverbal. Distance is another portion of this. How we stand and with people sends messages. There are certain times in the old days kind of thing, when you were crowded in line at Disney or at a festival or something like that, but we all have a little bubble. Even when there's a big group of people, there's still a little bit of bubble kind of thing, and many of us don't feel comfortable. For me, I feel it most in the grocery store. When I would be in line with my cart, and the person would be right behind me and they'd like touch my butt with their car. And I would just want to turn around and go, seriously? You can't put anything up here. The lady's paying with pennies up in front of us. It's not going to go any faster than this. I need a little bit of space here. So there are different spaces. There's a public distance, and that's anywhere from 12 feet out. That's kind of the space that teachers use in a classroom. Anything more than 25 feet and beyond, two-way communication is almost impossible. There's social distance, and that ranges from about 4 feet to 12 feet. That's where people have the most communication. You know, students are most satisfied with teachers who have that distance between them. It's usually about the size of a desk. You know, when you're at Macy's, kind of thing like that, you're about 4 feet away from the person you feel comfortable, kind of thing like that. Even though 6 feet is the new norm, right? But back in the day, kind of thing. And it was a big thing when Nordstrom's had their people come around the counter and hand people the bag. People were like, oh, what are you doing over there? Because you're breaking that social distance. There's personal distance, which is anything between 18 inches and 4 feet. The closer the distance is, the closer you feel to the person. You know, couples stand closer as they feel closer to each other, right? And then intimate distance is anything less than 18 inches. The people who are most emotionally close to, and then mostly in private situations. We also have territories. You know, where our personal space is an invisible bubble, there's also a physical territory that kind of remains stationary. So when you were going to classrooms and you would walk into a classroom, after about the first couple of weeks, you'd have a space that you'd sit in. That would be your chair. And if somebody would like be sitting there, you'd be like, wait, they're in my chair, right? You kind of get that personal space kind of thing. Time is also a part of this nonverbal communication. Chronomics, it describes the study of how humans use time and structure. In the United States, Canada, and Northern Europe, time is very highly valued. Waiting is an indicator of status. Important people may be seen by appointment only, while it's acceptable for them to intrude without notice on less important people. You know, it's easy for a boss to just drop in on an employee anytime they want to, whereas an employee just can't walk into the boss's office. So the other day I had a doctor's appointment, right? And I was at work at the disc office on Gene, Autry, and Ramon, and my eye doctor's in Indian Wells. And of course I was running a little late. So as I'm driving there, I call him and I'm just like, okay, so I know my appointment's at 4:30. I might be just a little late. And the lady who answered the phone, who I didn't recognize and didn't know, she goes, oh, okay, so Mr. Slusser, how late are you gonna be? I'm like, just a couple minutes. And she goes, well, you're gonna be more than 10 minutes late? I'm like, I don't think so, but depending on traffic on 111, you know, heaven only knows kind of thing. She goes, well, if you're more than 10 minutes late, you're gonna need to reschedule. And I'm like, I am? And she goes, that's the office rules. And it's like, okay, I've gone to this doctor for 20 years. I know him personally. And I'm like, really? And she goes, yes. And I said, well, I won't be more than 10 minutes late. She goes, okay, but if you are, you will have to reschedule. And I'm like, oh. So I'm zipping down 111, right? Going through yellow lights, swerving in and out, because there was no way I was going to be more than 10 minutes late. So I get there right on time. I get out of my car. I run up the stairs. I don't even wait for the elevator. I run in there and I'm like, oh, 3 minutes late, not bad. And she's like, oh, Mr. Slusser, okay, take a seat. The doctor will be right with you. I'm like, really? So I take a seat and I'm sitting there and I hear him talking to a patient and he's just chit-chatting away. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. I'm steaming, right? So he comes out, says goodbye to the patient, comes to me, oh, Don, how are you doing? And I'm like, I'm doing fine. I was here on time. And he goes, what? And I said, yeah, because if I was 10 minutes late, I'd have to reschedule, but you're 15 minutes late, and I guess that's okay, huh? He goes, I'm a doctor. And I'm like, you're an eye doctor. You're not saving a life. And he goes, so should we reschedule? And I said, no. And he goes, get in here. What's going on? So I told him the whole story about his little secretary, and he thought it was funny. But it just shows you, it's like, okay, she's got the power. She can do that, right? The use of time greatly depends on cultures. In some cultures, punctuality is critically important, whereas others, it's barely considered. I remember when we were in Hawaii for the first time, and we were kids, and my dad found a nice Lutheran church down the corner from my uncle's. And so he's like, okay, so Sunday we'll go to church. And we're all like, oh, we're on vacation. He goes, we can go to church in shorts and barefooted. We're like, oh my God. So we went to church. We had shorts on and Hawaiian shirts and bare feet. And we had our pictures taken and stuff. And church started at like 9 o'clock. So we get there at 8:45 and there's nobody there. And my dad's like, well, this is odd. So we're standing there waiting around. 5 minutes to 9. My dad's like, okay, let's go sit down. And my mom's like, Jack, the lights aren't even on. And he goes, it's almost 9 o'clock. So we go sit down. So then it's 9 o'clock and he's just looking at his clock and he goes, Donnie, go out there and see what time it says this church starts. And I'm like, 9 o'clock. And he goes, go out there and see. So I go out there, I see the minister, and I just want to grab him and go, you need to start church because my dad's going to blow a gasket. But I don't. So I go out there and come back. It's like, it's 9 o'clock. And he goes, well, it's certainly not starting at 9 o'clock. So about 7 minutes after, the lights turn on, people start milling around. My dad is fuming. Jesus Christ could have walked on water in front of the church and he would not have accepted. He was so mad that minister wouldn't have been able to do anything. But because time is very important, you know, but like if you're in New York City and the party, and you're invited to a party and they're like, oh, come about 10, and you show up at 10, they're going to be like, oh, what are you doing here so early? All right? But if you're in Salt Lake City and you're invited for dinner at 6 and you show up at 6:30, you could miss dinner. My parents, they would tell people dinner starts at 6. If you want to have appetizers, come earlier. If people showed up at 6, literally we were sitting down having dinner. So be careful with that, right? Physical attractiveness is also part of nonverbal communication. Scientists measured the degree in which physical attractiveness affects interaction with people. Men and women whom others view as attractive are rated as being more sensitive, kind, strong, sociable, and interesting than other people. Part of this is clothing. The clothing that we use means a lot non-verbally. When you look at people, you know, it can convey at least 10 different meanings. Your economic level, your educational level, your trustworthiness, your social position, levels of sophistication, economic background, social background, educational background, level of success, moral character. All those things. I remember being in a bank in Blythe with one of my friends that lives there. And this old cowboy guy walked in with boots and messy jeans and ripped jeans and dirty and stuff like that. And my friend Terry goes, he's worth millions. I'm like, what? And she goes, there's so many old farmers in Blythe that have millions of dollars and you'd never know it. I'm like, well, not the way he dresses. And you go out and look at his truck and it's the same thing. And then your physical environment is also part of this. Research confirms that the environment can shape the kind of interactions that take place in it. You know, if you've been to different houses, you can tell houses that are comfortable and warm and friendly. And then there are other houses that are very stiff and formal that aren't as comfortable. You know, rooms, if they're furnished, influence how people are going to interact with them. The whole feng shui attitude. My mom had an interior designer come and do her house in Tucson because she wanted it to be southwest and just a living room. And so she'd show it to people and be like, oh, Yvonne, it looks nice, kind of like that. And then they'd go into the kitchen or into the dining room or the family room. She goes, nobody sits in my living room. I'm like, okay, Mom, it's not a living room. It's an unliving room. It's too sterile. It's too perfect. It looks like it's in a Macy's catalog. Nobody wants to sit and disturb anything. I said, you need to mess it up or do something so that people will feel more comfortable in it. All right, that's Chapter 6, Nonverbal Communication. So, Chapter 6 this week, same as always. You're going to write to a response. You're going to look at 2 other people's responses and write on that. You're going to take a quiz. And then next week is the midterm exam worth 250 points. Good luck with that, right? Have a good week.